I'm going to talk to you today about the topic of alcohol. It's kind of a loaded, pardon my pun, subject. People are on both sides of the aisle when it comes to alcohol. Some people say, hey, it's a great thing as long as you do it in moderation. Other people say, don't drink a drop ever. You've got the mothers against drunk drivers. They're mad, justifiably so, because of all of the tragedies that have occurred in so many families. We know that so many of the fatalities on the roads are caused by alcohol. There's just a lot of emotions on both sides of the aisle on this subject today. And so today I want to examine the subject in a little greater detail than perhaps some of you may have thought about it. Our topic is, are you sure you want to drink? And I hope that we can make this topic today relevant to younger viewers, more perhaps than to older viewers. Those of you who are kids, teenagers, preteens even, stay with us. The information that I share with you today, I believe, could impact your life in a very profound way. I wish I had known this material when I was a young person because, I heard various people say, you shouldn't drink. Other people said, oh, it's no big deal. My parents didn't drink. There was a lot of alcoholism in my family on both sides of my mother's family and on my father's family. My grandfather on my father's side was a big-time alcohol producer and sold his product all over. My father had never tasted a drop, wanted nothing to do with it. It was not his lifestyle. But yet, the majority of our relatives, if you went to a family get-together, there was alcohol everywhere. But my parents would discourage it and tell me it wasn't good. They would take me to the Bible and read me Bible verses, and I would hear about it. But yet, the community I lived in, everybody was drinking alcohol. If you went to the local church for a potluck, there was alcohol in some of the places. And all the community events were alcohol-sponsored. If you had the local town would have an event, there was always the beer garden on one side of the street, and there was all the other events on the other side of the street, and the beer garden was by far the most well-attended. And I remember, there were things that affected me one way or the other. I heard about people who contracted cirrhosis of the liver, and I remember hearing the graphic descriptions of the person who had the cirrhosis of the liver, the bowel incontinence and the smell and the final stages of the disease. And I thought, boy, that's terrible. So you definitely don't want to be a hardcore alcoholic. But, what about actually just, a moderate drink? We talk about social drinking. And a lot of people are involved in social drinking, believing that they can drink responsibly. I remember on the way to the airport to come here, I saw a billboard for a beer company that said, designated driver and have a good time. And I thought, well, if everybody's going to have a good time, what about the poor designated driver? Is he having a miserable time? How much do they have to pay this guy to do this? Is he just a familiar taxi driver? Or, it just didn't quite make sense to me. But yet it's somehow they're trying to get past the bad feelings that are in the marketplace today as they're trying to advertise and promote their products, constantly trying to find a way to glamorize the consumption of alcohol. When you travel, you look in a lot of the travel magazines, you've got, beautiful girl in a white bikini, sand beach, a good-looking guy, he's a real hunk, all buff and strapped, and they got tans, and, advertising the good life, having a good time, having lots of fun. There's a bottle in the background, and it all looks really nice. We never advertise alcohol showing people who are drunk. We don't show the homeless guy, the old wino that you can smell in advance. My wife and my son and I, we spent part of a winter in southern Mexico, and we just had a great time. We'd take taxis places. We typically would try to ride a bus and find our way around in the city, but we knew if we got too lost, we could always take a cab back because we could just show them our address. And those cabbies were amazing. Those they were called taxistas. They're not cabbies, but they knew where everything was. It was absolutely amazing. There was no taxi driver that I ever encountered that if I told him the address of the house we were living in, he could not find it and get us back within an hour, no matter how lost we got on the bus lines. And it was pretty amazing. But a lot of times we just like to trek around the city, and we like to go down to this one little circular area they called El Centro in the middle of the city. And there were always street vendors, and there were guys with their violins, and just a lot of local entertainment was there, and a lot of fun to observe. And to get there, though, we always had to walk down this one street, and there were a couple little empty spots along the alleyways there. And there was an old homeless man who you could smell at least 40 feet away. He had not been bathed since the last monsoon, I believe. And the smell was incredible. Alcohol and urine and body odor and filth and excrement, and it was terrible. He had totally and completely lost his life into his alcoholism, and it was really, really sad. And I'm sure he's no longer alive today because of the physical condition that he was in. And we used to feel so bad for that poor man because he had gone that far over the edge. And I'm sure there's a lot of social drinkers watching today who are saying, well, I drink responsibly. That's kind of an industry slogan today, drink responsible. Be responsible with your alcohol consumption. Don't sell it to minors. Don't give it to kids. Don't drink more than you should. Know your limits, and everything's okay. I personally have a different opinion. You're going to see my opinion come out in this program. Drinking is supposed to be fun. That's how it's portrayed. The guy who's drinking, he's the life of the party. He's having a good time. It's lots and lots of fun. And you can't have a good party without some sort of, entertainment, and the entertainment works better with alcohol, and everybody's, they're cracking out a few beers, or they're drinking wine or wine coolers, or, they go to the mixed drinks, or, they're just chasing the hard stuff down, whatever. The problem that people don't realize is what they're doing to their bodies, and what the toll of that alcohol is taking on the countries socially. The costs are staggering. The cost to each country, at least over the United States, the statistics that I've seen are in the billions of dollars. Not just for the cost of the alcohol, but for the loss of productivity for work time. Those employers whose employees cannot come to work because they're too hungover or because they get sick. Alcohol does increase the amount of sick days. If you're going to be drinking alcohol, you're statistically going to take more sick days off than people who will not. And your employer then is going to be having to make up for that in some way. The destruction that comes to families, the cost of the infrastructure to take care of your children while you're in treatment, or take care of your children because now the social services has to take your children and put them into foster care because you can't stay off of whatever substance that you're on, be it alcohol or some other controlled substance. And then there's the accidents on the highways. The cost of repairing vehicles and putting people back together, the extra medical costs from these accidents, also the extra medical costs from the people who simply are going to be suffering from more illnesses and diseases than those who are not drinking. So the costs are rather staggering. It's into the billions of dollars. Then there comes the social cost to the persons who are drinking. In 1908, the Pew Center on the States reported that an astounding 1 in every 100 adults in the U.S. was behind bars. That's incredible. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit a parole probation officer in the state that I live in. I was sitting in his office, and I was asking him questions. I wanted to know some information. And he got onto his computer right there from the agency that he worked for. And the statistic that he got was that in our state, that 1 out of 30 persons either was behind bars or was on parole or was on probation. 1 out of 30 persons. Well, that's pretty astounding. But, nationally we're looking at 1 out of 100 adults in the U.S. behind bars. It says, while drunk driving gets the most attention, the incidence of other alcohol-involved crimes includes domestic violence, underage drinking, and assault. These are reaching a staggering proportions. What we're discovering is that alcohol is involved not only just in accidents and in healthcare. Alcohol is involved in a tremendous amount of crime. And so it's obvious that in spite of what the industry is trying to do with saying drink responsibly, the consumer is doing something different. And the cost to society is stupendous. On our chart, it says that 5.3 million adults, 36% of those under correctional supervision at the time, were drinking at the time of their first conviction offense. We're talking 5.3 million people. These are U.S. statistics. 30% of those who are under correctional supervision, and we've got 1 out of every 100 people in America is locked up at the moment. We've got actually the largest population percentage in the world behind bars of any nation, which is pretty amazing. 40% of state prisoners were convicted of violent crimes, were under the influence of alcohol at the time of their offense. The more violent the crime, the greater the likelihood that alcohol was involved. So, we're not talking about parking tickets. We're talking about, rape. We're talking about murder. We're talking assault and battery. Assault and battery very frequently has alcohol involved with it. 25% of state prisoners were given a standard questionnaire to screen for alcoholism, and they all 25% of those tested positive. So obviously, the attempt to put out the air in that people are drinking responsibly is not a correct social statement. It's quite obviously different. I think that alcohol starts much younger and the consumption and the effect in people's lives starts much younger than you can imagine. Our picture on our screen right now is of a baby bottle with wine in it. I do remember seeing my cousins at family reunions and picnics. I remember seeing my cousins and my aunts and my uncles taking the top off the baby bottle and pouring beer or wine into the baby bottle and putting the thing back on and giving it to the toddlers who are running around in their little diapers. And after a while, I remember seeing toddlers sleeping under bushes because they were drunk. It was a great way to get the kids to shut up so we could have a good time. I don't know that my family, as degraded as it perhaps was such a huge exception. We actually can find in studies that there seems to be more of that kind of behavior than people really understand. Youth violence, we've got so many of our youth involved in gangs today. And I know that drugs are a big part of their culture today. However, alcohol is a huge part of this picture. Gang violence and what we see, what's happening with our teenagers and even our pre-teenagers. The majority of the gang violence that ends up being dealt with by law enforcement and social service officers, it almost always involves some sort of alcohol abuse. It's considered a number one college problem. Colleges are saying, colleges are saying that we're having a bigger problem with alcohol than almost anything else. 80 plus yearly deaths from overdoses in college dormitories across the country. Now, we're just not talking about some kid who gets himself sloshed and he passes out in his room, and he misses a couple of classes. We're not talking about somebody who spends the next 3 or 4 hours with the dry heaves hugging the porcelain god. We're talking about somebody who takes a lethal dose of alcohol and dies, 80 or more each year somewhere in the United States. Statistics show us that 5 or more million teenagers are drinking alcohol on a daily basis. We're not just talking about they have one because there's a party on a weekend. We're talking about it's 7 days a week. And they're drinking perhaps more than they're even willing to be honest to tell in the statistics. We know that more than 40% of 12 to 15-year-old kids are drinking alcohol. on a regular basis. It's not just they tried it once and they didn't like it. It's something they tried and they liked, and they're continuing to do it. It's involved in so many cases of domestic violence that it just makes your head swim. And I think the reason that families are being torn apart is because it's so prevalent with the adults and the young people in the same household. We're finding that the average age that a person tries alcohol their first time is 11 years of age for a boy and 13 years of age for a girl. That's when they're starting. I mean, they obviously are getting it at home or somewhere where they have access to it, even though they are not old enough to purchase it, they still have it. And by age 14, 41% of young people have had at least one drink in their lifetime. And the average age that kids are starting to drink on a regular basis is 15 years of age. I know we keep hearing this: drink responsibly, get a designated driver. That's the mantra that we see in the media today, but that's not what's happening amongst our young people. Teens who are drinking before age 15 are 5 times more likely to become an alcoholic than if they wait until they're 21 years of age. So the effect on the mind is very, very profound. Psychiatry is telling us that during this formative age, under 21, that the brain is still forming, it is still processing, it is still maturing, and when you add alcohol to the mix of the brain chemistry, that maturing process, that formative process, then becomes seriously affected, and in some cases ceases to happen. Early age drinking onset is also associated with alcohol-related violence, not only amongst people under 21, but also adults, throughout all age groups. Law enforcement today tells us that the incidence of domestic violence in homes is dramatically affected by alcohol. In fact, they're saying in more and more cases, when they go to a home where domestic violence is occurring, they know that it's either drugs or alcohol, and most likely going to be alcohol. Research has found that alcohol is consumed prior to an offense in nearly 3/4 of domestic violence cases. And so here you have a family. You've got a young man marries a young lady. This morning I saw some friends. Their daughter had posted their picture of when they were in their very early 20s. There's their engagement picture. They've got these big smiles on their faces. Robert had some really funny glasses. They were huge. They were almost like you could wear them for ski goggles. But my glasses back then were kind of funny too. But there they were. They were. She was cute. He was handsome. They were smiling. Oh, the smiles on their faces. You could see the emotion. They were so thrilled. They were joining their lives together. And you think about that. You've got a man and a woman. They've joined their lives together. They're starting a family. Alcohol comes into the family, becomes part of the picture, and what happens? The behavior changes. The personalities begin to act differently than they would before, and the inhibitions are beginning to be removed that prevent aggressive behavior. And she's angry with him and he's angry with her, and they're arguing over some foolish trivial thing that if they were in their right minds they would never do. And the next thing you know, they're pounding on each other, and some neighbor or some child or somebody calls 911 and somebody goes to jail. If you watch the cop shows on TV, you see this. It's a routine thing, day after day, night after night. That's what law enforcement deals with. About 48% of these convicted domestic offenders were alcohol dependent. And a minimum of 1 in 5 people arrested by police in the United Kingdom are testing positive for alcohol. So it's a big, huge thing that's part of the crime scene. It's part of the misery scene that people are suffering from in the world today. And it's not what the magazine ads and the TV ads and the things that we've seen in the past are purporting it to be. It's not glamorous. It's not cool. It's not fun when you are on the end of the violence, or you're the victim of a crime. And if you're the perpetrator of one of those things, it ruins your life as well, because you end up with a criminal record. You have a difficult time getting a job. It's just not what people need to do to have a really happy life and in a fulfilled life. I want to talk about women and drinking specifically for a few moments. In 1990, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, there were stated that pregnant women or people who are planning to be pregnant, if they were drinking, they need to put it aside, put it behind them, remove it from their life until the pregnancy was over, and then they could start consuming alcohol again. That was what the guidelines were. That was the recommendation, and a lot of people looked at that, and it was supposed that people were obeying that and recognizing the validity of it. But by 1995, 4 times as many pregnant women were frequently consuming alcohol as they were back in 1991. 400% increase, even after the word goes out officially, women who are pregnant or considering pregnancy should not consume alcohol. And the researchers were speculating that the increase in pregnant women and women who are planning on being pregnant is because we have this little thing that's out in the media, and the media is constantly bringing out misinformation. I suppose if you're a reporter and you want to get something that's new and fresh and somebody else doesn't have, you grab things and run with it without maybe engaging the logical processes sometimes. But we've got what we call the French paradox, where people are purporting that the consumption of wine is healthy. Others are purporting that perhaps the consumption of beer could be healthy. We see even hard liquor, as long as you take it in moderation, it can be healthy. And at one time, we saw medical people saying that all alcohol is harmful. Today, you're going to find some websites, if you go out and Google this topic, you'll find some websites are telling you that perhaps moderate drinking may have some benefit to longevity. It may have some benefit to the cardiovascular system, but they're all cautioning against excesses. Make sure it's in moderation. Well, I believe, in my opinion, the truth of the matter is that if you're looking at anything that's ever promoted or studies that have promoted the possibility of benefits of alcohol comes from the drinking of wine amongst people in the Mediterranean area, we call it the French paradox. Because here the paradox is something that's bad for you seems to be promoting benefits. The benefits that we could see could more than likely come from the consumption of the grape. The grape and the grape juice does not need to be fermented to give these benefits, but the benefits comes from chemical compounds that we call polyphenols. Those polyphenols do have cardiovascular benefits. They do protect the cardiovascular system. They may prevent inflammation. They may help prevent, arterial plaque. They may help the production and the pumping of the blood. But we don't need the alcohol. We don't need the fermentation or the denigration or the degradation of the grape juice in order to have that benefit. You'll probably get even a better benefit if you don't ferment the juice of the grape. The real effect, friends, is when you drink your alcohol. Anybody who's studied into pregnancy, that baby is sharing the same blood as the mother. And we're very careful in America to make certain that our doctors and our pharmacists don't provide medications that could be contraindicated in pregnancy, because they recognize that while maybe this asthma medicine might be really great for the mom, she's got a baby inside who probably doesn't need that. may even be harmful, or there's many medications we found that cause birth defects and things of that nature. And so we always say, you know, don't do that while you're pregnant. You'll have to wait until afterwards to start that course of medication. The effect is basically, if you're going to put this baby, you know, it's inside of you, and you're going to put this alcohol into your system, you more or less are putting your baby inside of a bottle of alcohol, and you're turning your baby into a little pickle. You know, it's kind of graphic, it's kind of shocking, but that's the effect. That's really the reality. This poor child, you're pickling the poor little kid's brain. We really don't know the effect for certain of alcohol on the human brain when it's developing. We don't know exactly what stage of development it's the most harmful and the least harmful. All we know is that it is harmful. Just talk to somebody who works for Child Protective Services or somebody who's a social worker, and just ask them what their opinion is about pregnant mothers drinking alcohol, consuming alcohol, and ask them what they know about fetal alcohol syndrome, and they'll sit you down and they'll talk to you for the rest of the day. We have a large group of our young people, our children and youth today, who are suffering from fetal alcohol syndrome, whose brains are impaired permanently, and it was not their choice. They've never had a choice, and they've never, ever had the opportunity to have a complete life, and it's not really a fair thing for them. From the website that I found this on that you see on your screen, 51% of women of childbearing age between 18 and 25 and 53% of 26 to 34-year-olds were reporting the use of alcohol within the last month. You know, it used to be if you were working in a clinical setting and a young lady or a mother came in and you know, she tested positive for a pregnancy, if you asked her about alcohol, she always would say, well, I quit as soon as I knew I was pregnant. Well, when did you know you were pregnant? The first month, second month, third month? How far down the road did you actually know? How much damage had you already done? Those are the ones who are actually attempting to be responsible to some extent. And then you have the ones who, they don't care. They continue on. 51%. At least are continuing to drink throughout their pregnancy. 17% of women of childbearing age between 18 and 25 and 13%, 26 to 34, they're saying that they actually are involved in binge drinking. Now, they may not be pregnant, but they're of that age, and you know, some of those women are in each group. The problem we have is it's staggering. National survey found that more than half the women aged 15 to 44 drink when they're pregnant. That's the grim reality. We don't have pretty statistics to share with people. You know, I talk to people who are in obstetrics, and they tell me that, you know, let's say 15 or 20 years ago, very few women would admit to drinking while they were pregnant. And today they say the majority will admit to drinking while they're pregnant because they don't think there's anything wrong with it. They're not worried about it. They're not concerned about it. And you know, the effect is on the babies. The mom gets to get away with that, but the child never gets a chance to get away from it ever again. I want to talk about the immune system. You know, immune systems are very, very important to me. My immune system, I've had some real issues with my immune system, you know, from time to time in my life. My own personal struggles with health. I struggled with multiple sclerosis for more than 20 years before finding a way to leave it behind. I wish you could see the pictures of me back then. I was pretty scary. I looked like I perhaps had escaped from a concentration camp. You know, I'm over 6 feet tall. I probably weighed just a little over 130 pounds, and my cheeks were sunken in, and my eyes were. I see those pictures, and it still scares me. It absolutely gives me the shivers up my spine to look at the pictures that I had back then. But you know, immunity is so important. We live in a world where, you know, the news is constantly telling us that pandemics are on the way. And, you know, we're trying to immunize against everything and anything. And, you know, if you if you talk about that story, you can get a lot of people upset. That's not our message today. But we're always trying to find some way to protect people in some way. And we tell people, wash your hands. 83% of communicable diseases are transmitted by dirty fingers. So avoid that. I see people on airplanes wearing masks, more in Asia than you will in North America. But we see people trying not to spread a disease, people trying not to get a disease or contract a disease. But we do find that when we're talking about our immune response, that just a couple of drinks will decrease our immune response by perhaps as high as 60% or more. And let's say you went out and had a real binge, Let's say you drank 6 or 8 drinks or 10 or 12 drinks or even more over the course of a long night. What do you think the net effect is going to be on your immune system? Probably will have paralyzed your immune system beyond any function whatsoever during that period of time. So many people are probably facing lifelong illnesses that they've had to deal with because of that lack of immunity, because of the alcohol that they consumed. Personally, I think I can live my life very, very much easier if I'm not struggling with that. It's already, I'm concerned about how much sugar I eat. I'm concerned about when I go to bed at night so that I don't get too tired. I'm worried about how much stress I'm under. There's a lot of these factors that we all we work on our nutrition, we work on our exercise, we want some aerobic exercise, we want to get some vitamin D from the sunlight so our immune system is up and functioning. We've all got these great ideas about how to stay healthy, but yet, our recreation, if we're consuming alcohol, is working against us. And, yes, you did take your echinacea or your vitamin C or whatever it is that it's in your mind that's going to protect you in the future from some disease. But you're shutting off everything that you're doing by consuming the alcohol that you do. I want to take it to the Scripture because I believe, friends, that God says something about alcohol, and I really think that perhaps we ought to look at what God said. I believe God knows more about the human body and the human mind than anyone in the entire universe. He created it. We're told we're fearfully and wonderfully made. So I go to the owner's manual, and I want to find out what it said. I've been doing this pretty much all my life. When I was a young person, I remember we got a new car, and we brought the car home, and I suppose maybe 10 or 11 years of age at that time, and very inquisitive. My mind was really digging into everything, and so I looked in the glove box of this car, and I opened it up, and here's an owner's manual, this book, about this big and about this thick, and it's just full of information, and I'm reading it, and I'm telling my dad how to take care of his new car. And I think he got a little tired of that sometimes because, sometimes he'd just kind of ask me to stop giving him all this advice because he thought he could take care of his car without all of that. But, I was counseling him on what kind of tire pressure and where his tires ought to be and when he should rotate them and what kind of gasoline we should be using and what kind of oil we should be using. And I remember one day I'm saying, Dad, are you using the oil that it says in the book for the car? And he said, no, I buy it from the parts store and I get such and such. And I said, but no, Dad, the book says we have to use this oil that's made by the manufacturer for this vehicle. And he says, look, they're just trying to make extra money after selling the car. The oil I get is just as good or better. Sometimes we think that we don't have to listen to the owner's manual because we don't think the owner's manual really is being all that genuine. But friends, I want to tell you, God has never been disingenuous in his attempts to enhance the life and the well-being of his children. Everything you'll find in the Bible on the subject of health is there for a reason to enhance your health, to give you a longer and happier life. Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 1. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1 says, wine is a mocker Strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. And I heard that when I was a young person. I heard it over and over again. But yet, I just didn't trust God. I had some distrust issues with God, and so I would look at people who were drinking, and they seemed to be having more fun than me. And I would look at the people who weren't drinking, and they didn't seem to be having nearly as much fun as those other people over there, and I kind of wished I could get into this group and have a little more fun because I thought my life was boring. But then I'd remember this verse, wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. And, I had this dilemma. I'd look at this side, and I'd look at that side, and I'd go back, and I'd go forth. And I struggled with it. And I struggled with it for years, but I didn't take a drink. I just didn't know. If I didn't know for sure, I wasn't going to jump. Unfortunately, when I was in my middle teen years, I began to place less and less value on what God had to say about things because I became, as Solomon says, wise in my own eyes. And I believed that I knew more than my elders when I became a middle teenager. I looked at the lives of the people who were older than me, those who I was supposed to be respecting, fellow community members, fellow church members, family members, whatever, and I began to see the mistakes they were making, and I thought, I'm not doing stuff like that. I began to question their judgment, and I began to say, I'm old enough to make my own choices, live by my own judgment. I'm not going to live my life by what people are telling me. I will live my life by what I choose and what I think is best for me. So in my newfound independence, I decided that I would put aside the counsel of the Scripture because I was so wise, and I began to live the life the way that I wanted to. Unfortunately, by the time, and it was statistical. You look at the statistics we just covered, that was right on the money. By the time I was 21 years of age, what was I? I was an alcoholic. How did it impact my life? Did it make my life better? No, it did not make my life better. I cannot tell you how many times I woke up in the morning with my head feeling like it was about this big, like it was so big I couldn't get it through the bathroom doorway, and my stomach feeling like it was going to turn upside down if it wasn't already, and this nasty feeling that would go with you for the next 2 or 3 days from that horrible binge I'd been on. And then it got to where it wasn't just one binge after the other. They just kind of blurred into each other. It became difficult to work and to always earn the money that I needed. I found that I didn't have as much money to pay my bills and put parts in my vehicle and pay for the gasoline and pay my rent and to buy food and clothing and things that I needed because I was spending it on alcohol. My weekends would spend $200 or $300 sometimes on alcohol and out drunk and partying and things like that. And then came along, the rent is due, and now what do I do? And it became very, very difficult to continue to live this life. And I began to panic. How would I ever get out of this? Because I could see myself just spiraling down, and I wanted out of this thing. And so I began to try, and I decided that I needed to quit. Well, there's one thing about alcohol, you can quit. I quit at least twice a week for years. But I found that I was beyond the control point, and I could start again just as easy as I could quit, and I just had this cycle that went on and on and on. I began to look back at that verse there in Proverbs and realize, I was not very wise at all, indeed. I want to look at another verse, Proverbs 23:29 through 33. It says, "Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who hath contentions? Babbling? Who hath wounds without cause?" Yeah. I remember meeting a friend one morning. He's got a big black eye. Where did you get that? I don't know. He didn't want to talk about it. I don't know where he got that, but you just didn't ask him about it. Who has the redness of the eyes? Here's the answer. They that tarry along at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth its color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright, and at last it biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder. Thine eyes shall behold a strange woman, and thy heart shall utter perverse things. Boy, it really, Solomon had been out partying, I can tell. He had been out and made a fool of himself, and he knew exactly what that scene was like. You know, the redness of the eyes, your eyes hurt, they don't work very well, you know, the hangover. It wasn't a good scene for him. You look at the strange woman, you know, and look at Solomon, you know, who knows but all of this womanizing that he did with his harem, this huge harem that he had in his kingdom, how much of that would not have happened if he had not been given to, you know, the wine? Because in Solomon's case, he's writing this stuff experientially. A lot of Solomon's writings are from his own experience, trying to tell the youth of his family and the youth of his kingdom and the youth of the generations and the eras to come, don't make the mistakes that I made. You know, I've got a teenage son, and I keep telling him, why is it you want to learn from your own mistakes? Why don't you look at the mistakes in my life and the lessons that I've learned and just skip that part? Don't go out, young people, and make all the same mistakes that your parents made or people who are trying to teach you from the mistakes that they made. You know, mistake is really sometimes not a mistake unless you learn the lesson from it. And if you learn the lesson from it, then share it with other people. And if you haven't made that mistake, then take heed to what they're trying to share with you. You know, I'm a bit of a prophecy student. I really enjoy reading the book of Daniel. One of the things that impressed me with the book of Daniel was in Daniel chapter 1 and verse 8. You know, here's these young men. They've been taken from Jerusalem. They've been headed off to Babylon. They're captives. Nebuchadnezzar was looking to try and take the finest people from all of the lands that he was capturing and putting under captivity, and he would take the finest, he would bring them to Babylon, he would educate them, and then he would scatter them throughout this. And so he was homogenizing and mixing the cultures so that there would never be another nationalistic feeling that could tear his empire apart. He was just trying to he put all the social things into the blender and they'd come out the other side. And now it was all Babylonian, and there was no more Jewish and no more Assyrian or no more Egyptian. They were all put together. And so here they're all being taken off to the capital of Babylon. And part of the program is going to be where these young men, you're going to eat what the king is eating from his own table, from his own cafeteria, and you're going to be drinking the same stuff that's on his table. You're going to be treated like royalty. And of course the king was drinking wine, and he was eating a lot of things that were forbidden, and so they had to make a choice. Daniel chapter 1 verse 8 tells us, "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself." He purposed in his heart. And if you read the rest of this story, which we're not going to go into today, you should read the rest of this story in chapter 1 and chapter 2. You will find that God rewarded that purposing in his heart. Eventually, the captain of the guard there and the captain of the young people's home there, he said, "Okay, I'll give you a test. I'll let you try it. I'm going to give you 10 days. And if you look kind of scrawny and you don't look so good to me, and if you're not very wise, then, you know, I'm going to stop it, because if you start looking too pathetic, the king's going to notice, and it's going to be off with my head." And so they did the 10 days, and they went on their knees and they said, "God, we've got 10 days. That's not very much time for a whole bunch of physiology to take place here. So can you turn up the intensity on your blessings on us?" And God was faithful, and he did that. And when they were taken, to be examined, they were wiser and fairer and fatter, and they were allowed to continue that on throughout their entire generation that they were there. Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9 and 10 says, "Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor drunkards, nor revelers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God." And you know, when I was struggling with alcohol, it really bothered me. God began to start to speak to me very profoundly and very powerfully, and he began to impress on me that I needed to stop. And so I tried. In my own strength, I tried very, very diligently to put alcohol behind me, but it was something in my own strength I could not do. I tried, but I could not do it. And I began to be pretty worried about it because the years had gone on. I mean, it started in my later middle teens, and suddenly I discover myself, I'm over 30 and I'm still struggling with this thing. And I put it behind me for a few days, and then I get out of town somewhere and somebody hands something to me, and I am absolutely in my own strength powerless to deal with it, and I do it again because the addiction had set in so strong. What happens with alcohol is it damages the frontal lobe of the brain. It shuts down the processing in the frontal lobe of the brain. The frontal lobe of the brain is where you make your conscious decisions. It's where your judgment lies. And if your judgment isn't working, you'll continue to do things that you don't want to do because the lower part of the brain, where the lower nature lives, it will begin to actually bypass it, and you begin to almost act like a brute beast that doesn't have a conscience. You know, I looked at some of these verses here. 1 Corinthians 6:19 says, "What, know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which you have of God? You're not your own." I thought, man, my body, it doesn't even belong to me. It's not mine, and yet I'm abusing it like this. I can't continue to do this. And then I read chapter 2 of Philippians. Verse 5 says, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus." How can you have the mind of Christ when you've bypassed the reasoning powers of the frontal lobe with alcohol? Now you're only living out of your own carnal fallen nature. It's just the human in control. There's no more divine control going on here. And so I'm speaking to those of you who are Christians who believe that moderate social drinking, a little wine here and there is okay. You have a glass with your meal. No, you're not out partying. You're not an alcoholic. But friends, it only takes one drink to begin to slow down the processes of the frontal lobe of the brain. And what happens to you? You begin to be victimized by the enemy of souls, because this is where the Holy Spirit can work. This is how the Holy Spirit's contact with your brain begins. That's the point of access. It's like your antenna for the heavenly broadcast corporation. And as God is sending down these messages to you, these messages of directions on how to live your life and of hope and how to give you power to overcome the sin in your life, you're beginning to turn off and turn down the broadcast from the heavenly broadcast station. And you're going to begin to hear the things around you that the Satan and his demons are beginning to tempt you with. And friends, I just don't know how, when you're in this life and death battle over sin, and this great controversy between good and evil that's being played out in this world and in our hearts, I don't know how you can be victorious as a Christian when you're turning down the broadcast where you're getting your directions from. There's a verse in Revelation chapter 22, verse 4. It says, "And they shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads." Why is it in their forehead? Oh, you could put his name just about anywhere, but I think it's there really because God recognized that's where he talks to us. That's where our thought processes are. It's where our conscience is, and it's where we make our judgment decisions. And when we have that mind of Christ, this part of our brain is so enhanced and so in tune and so connected, and God's just saying, well, where else would I put that stamp? Where else would I put that sign that says we're connected? Where else would I say this person has the mind of Christ? He has our divine character. He now has a godly character that we've put into him through this process of sanctification. And when you have that, then God says, I can seal you for salvation forever, throughout all eternity. Well, I don't want to stop the story quite there in my own life because I don't want to leave you with that I was defeated forever, because I wasn't. One day, my wife invited some people to our home to have a Bible study, which I was not too excited about because they seemed a little bit strange to me. You know, people with Bibles aren't quite the same as the people without the Bibles, and they bothered me. They made me concerned, and so I didn't like her there with these people, so I decided I would be there just to, control things and keep her from getting into some sort of fanaticism, Really strange. Here I am. I'm struggling with this thing. I'd like to put it behind. It's probably the source of salvation for me, but yet I'm scared of it, and so I'm trying to keep her out of trouble. But you know what these people had to say was so profound, and the messages that they gave in these Bible studies in our community, in our home, for the nights that they were there, they impacted me. And I saw from the message that they had that when Jesus would come, if I was still in the condition that I was, it was so degraded and so fallen that he would not be able to take me home with him. I would not be somebody that he could seal and say it was safe for all eternity in heaven, not to start sin up again. And I began to realize that I really, truly was in a lost condition, and I needed something in my life. I needed some power for this to be overcome. And so I began to plead with God, and I began to study the Bible. I began to read spiritual things hours every day. And for 3 months, I had this quest where I couldn't get enough of God's Word, and I began to read and read and read God's Word. 3 hours a day sometimes. I read so much that my eyesight almost began to go blurry on me. But one day I'm lost. I'm in the city of Minneapolis. I get into this goofy traffic situation, and I thought I finally found my way out of this twisted up neighborhood, and the next thing I know, I'm right back where I started from again. So I thought, well, I took a wrong turn. So I get back out, get on the street, get out. The third time, I end up in the same corner again. And I'm like, you know what? I'm never going to get out of here. I'm going to be all day going around in circles. This downtown's no place for a country boy. I'm going to get some directions. And so I stopped, and the only place that I could find a place to park was a liquor store. I ran in and said, hey, can you help me find such and such a street so I can get out to the main drag here? And he said, no problem. You go blah, blah, blah. So as I'm walking out of the liquor store, I'm looking around, and suddenly I see there's gallons and quarts and gallons and fifths and pints and, whatever. There's alcohol by the hundreds of gallons here. And it suddenly hit my mind that I didn't want any. There was absolutely no connection. And friends, I was psychologically and physiologically connected to this stuff. I could not stand not having some alcohol. I'd go a few days and then, wow, I was losing it. I'd get some more, and no matter where I was drinking something. But this came down to the point where there was absolutely no connection. There was no urge. There was no craving whatsoever. And as I'm walking out of there, I'm actually, in my mind, I'm seeing myself walking about this tall off the sidewalk. I'm that far off the ground. I'm just floating. I'm so excited because I realized I had been set free. That's more than 20 years ago. And I'm still free. And I'm grateful. And I'm so, so thankful. And people say, well, how did that happen? Explain how that happened. The alcoholism counselor said, you'll always be an alcoholic. You'll be a dry, miserable drunk the rest of your life. And there are these programs that people go in, and you take these various processes and various steps that you go through this thing and this thing and this thing, and now you become a dry alcoholic. You now are a dry drunk, and you're going to be that way for the rest of your life. And to me, I said, man, I don't want that. I don't want to be a dry, miserable person. God says he can set me free, and you'll be free indeed. And so I said, I want that, and I sought that, and God found it for me, and he gave it to me, and I lived it, I experienced it. But to explain it, I'm not sure I can explain it completely, but I did find this in the scripture. Psalms chapter 33 and verse 6. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and the breath of it by the words of his mouth. Wow. Jesus, if you look at John chapter 1, in the beginning was what? The Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. It was Jesus who was the creator. Jesus who then inspired the Holy Spirit to give us the scriptures that we have today. And I began to realize that as I'm reading God's Word, reading the Bible, those are the words of Jesus Christ, the Creator. And in them are power. You know, I heard a theologian say one time, and I believe it, that when he raised Lazarus from the dead, he had to make certain, he said, when he said to come forth, he said, Lazarus, come forth. Nobody else, nothing else, no dogs, no cats, no people. Nothing comes forth from the grave but Lazarus, because he had so much power in his voice that everything that had ever lived and died would come onto the earth again. And friends, that same incredible power is in the Word of God. And by reading that those many hours a day, that creative power began to come into my mind, and in my mind I was created anew, given a new life and a fresh start, and for which I'm so very grateful. Those of you who are young people today, don't choose to learn from your own mistakes. Be wise and learn from the mistakes from those who have gone on before you. Listen to the counsel of people who are telling you that there is a better way, because there is. You know, some people say, well, look, you went out and had all that fun. It wasn't all that much fun, friends. And the scars that you carry for the rest of your life from the things that you did in your foolish past are not all that pretty, and they're not all that fun to carry with you. But if you are the young person who heeds the counsel, and you make the right choices, and you don't go down those wrong paths, you can spend your entire life free in liberty, without the misery and without the sadness, and you don't have to look back, and you don't feel the regrets, and you don't have the scars. That's the full and abundant life that God wants for you. And if you live that kind of a life in cooperation with all of the principles of the kingdom of heaven, you will know that Revelation 22 verse 4 is yours. And they shall see his face, and his name will be in your forehead.